A group of Nebraska state senators pushing new legislation meant to combat domestic violence. One proposal would outlaw the use of technology to track and monitor victims. Another would strengthen penalties for serious and repeat domestic assault offenders. We have a breakdown of all the proposals on our website.
The Omaha Tribe of Nebraska taking the next step in their medical cannabis program. Today they reviewed their first application for a license to grow cannabis. Tribal officials say they're primarily looking for professionalism when it comes to those looking for a license.
Mega travel center and over-the-top convenience store Buc-ee's is coming to Gretna. The planned location is off I-80 and Highway 31, just across the interstate from the Nebraska crossing outlets. No word yet on when it could open to the public.
After oral arguments today, the Supreme Court seems likely to overturn President Trump's effort to fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. Trump tried to fire her in August based on allegations Cook committed mortgage fraud, which Cook denies. The High Court is expected to rule on the case in June.
President Trump is planning to give a speech in Iowa next Tuesday. White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles says the president is planning to talk about energy and the economy. The White House has not yet announced the time and location of the event.
Former Nebraska State Senator Lynn Walls making it official today. She's running for governor. The Democrat served in the legislature from 2017 until last year. She was term limited. Nebraska Governor Jim Pillen is on the Republican ballot. He is seeking re-election. The primary is in May.
We're